Welcome back to the Evolving Hunter podcast, where we talk with hunters, educators, conservation leaders, and everyday outdoors people about what it means to keep learning, keep improving, and keep showing up the right way. Whether you're brand new to hunting or still figuring it out, this show is about growing as hunters, sharing the lessons, and keeping the heritage moving forward. Let's jump into the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Evolving Hunter podcast. Thrilled that you've chosen to join us today. I think we're going to have just a really cool, unique episode for you today. And this is actually the second time we've recorded this episode. We had some technical difficulties in the first time, which we'll get into later on in the conversation. But I'm thrilled today to be talking with Jim Welsh. He is the Hunter Education Coordinator for the Yukon. Deputy Conservation Officer there in the Yukon as well, and a Sergeant of the White Horse Canadian Ranger Patrol. So Jim recently completed a massive long-range patrol by snow machine across Canada's Arctic, traveling from Herschel Island on the Yukon North Slope to Churchill, Manitoba, through arguably the most remote country on this continent. And so today we're going to talk about that expedition, but also what it can teach us about hunting, about outdoor judgment, survival, and respect for the land. Thanks so much for joining me today, Jim. I'm thrilled to have you on.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to be working with you after we've met. I've thought about those things a lot, and it's just a pleasure to talk to your community.
Awesome. Thanks. So, going back to this is our second time. Originally, we recorded the first episode while you guys were actually on the expedition. And I do actually have some of the footage from the first one, particularly the time when you took us outside and showed us where you were, which was incredible. So I'm going to try to work that in probably the end of the podcast. So listeners who want to go and watch the show can kind of get a view for what you were seeing. But I made a joke that this may be the first podcast live from the Arctic Ocean. I think you're just like a mile or so from the actual Arctic Ocean from where you were standing. And I think we found out why, because even with our great technology, doing a video based online podcast is a little challenging.
It's really telling you the remoteness of the place that we were, and how challenging that place is. I mean, we could barely keep reception going, and there's kind of a big blizzard while we were talking, and you know, well below zero outside, freezing cold. Staring at a vast, big landscape. Hard to get the stuff done in those places.
I couldn't imagine. Yeah, I think one of the things that excites me the most to hear about this expedition is that Arctic travel and Arctic exploration has something that has really captured my interest for years. And I think I made this joke when we first spoke, but I have a bookcase to my right here that's mostly full of books about different explorations that have occurred over time. So it's just really exciting to kind of have this as a topic, even though it's a little different for the Evolving Hunter podcast. We generally kind of talk about beginner hunter strategies and ethics and responsibility and hunters who are just getting started. But I think this is what an opportunity to have a chance to sit down and have a conversation about this this big expedition that you were on. So to jump right into it, Jim, for the listeners, if you could give us sort of a short version of who you are and maybe the different hats you wear in the Yukon, I think that could be a good way to get started.
Yeah, so I'm Jim Welsh, and I grew up in southeastern Canada, and but the north has pulled at me forever. And I became a really serious hunter when I was probably about 14 or 15. I worked in a meat packing plant in Ontario, and it just changed my perception of food and hunting. And I became really kind of serious about hunting at that time. And my dad, great guy, but not a big game hunter, took me out duck hunting, a couple things. So I got really serious about it. And from that point, I started going bow hunting every night after school, and spent all my time on the land and learning the hard way. I didn't have a lot of great mentors and made a ton of mistakes. And from that point, I got really serious when I worked as a bighorn sheep hunting guide, horseback, for about a decade. And then I worked in the Yukon guiding hunts for also about a decade. And I'm still out there, kind of known locally as a guy who's on the land with his family all the time. And in the Yukon, I teach the hunter education courses here. So it's kind of become my passion to get new young hunters out in the land. And do those things. And I also work as a deputy conservation officer here. So we're keeping wildlife out of town and doing that kind of stuff. And then I'm the sergeant of the Whitehorse Canadian Ranger Patrol, who were the kind of initiators of this big Arctic trip.
That's a lot of hats to be
Yeah,
wearing.
yeah. I'm a busy guy. I got lots of stuff going on. But, it's that passion for the outdoors that I think you probably share the same thing that keeps me kind of driven and keeps me outside. And, I find something when I'm outside that I don't get uh, anywhere else. So I'm pretty passionate about pursuing it and bringing other people on that trip with me.
So when you mentioned you were 14 working at a meat packing plant and decided you wanted to kind of really start investing your time into hunting. What was the initial draw there? Was it the food aspect, the adventure aspect? What was getting you outside there?
He was a little bit of both. Like, I was always a guy who was out in the I was that kid on his bike out in the bush all the time, and working in that plant, it just I saw the way food and animals were treated in a different way than I thought maybe it should be happening. And it was a great place. It was well cared for. But it gave me this drive to kind of start collecting my own food. And when I did that, I felt something different. That connection that you get when you're a hunter and you're getting your own food, you care for it and you can kind of pay respect for the animal. And there's that adventure part. And, it adds so much more depth to the consuming, and it gives you this relationship with your food that's a lot of people don't have. And I think in North America in general, that thing is lost a little bit. And when you get to experience it, if you do it in the right way and you're with the right people, it changes the way you see food, I think. And, I felt that at a young age and it's driven me ever since.
Absolutely. It definitely changes your relationship with how you view your food and your connection to even like connection to nature and et cetera. So, you've been hunting quite a while. Can you identify some ways in which your relationship may have evolved over time with hunting as you've kind of gone from just interested going out in bow hunting to now working in hunter education and working in conservation, how that may have shifted over time?
Yeah. It started out in as this Ontario thing and it's like the deer camp. Deer camp is more of a social, it's hunting, but it can be very like a social experience where everybody gets together. And as I moved north and west, I found this kind of adventure part of hunting. And, I had to learn how to pack horses and, got bucked off horses and got lost in the mountains of the Yukon with some crazy people a bunch of times. It evolved into this different thing where hunting became not just this collection of food, it became this way to go on the land. It became a way to make a living being way out there. I always tell a story about my first job in the Yukon when I became a guide. The outfitter would have me stand in a field at 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning, and he would fly over with a rock with a map tied on it and a big piece of flagging tape, and I'd have to figure out on the map where to go and it would have a time to be there. It was a different time before InReach and all those things. And, modern communication where, it was a real adventure. Once a week, you kind of had contact with the outside world and you got to escape into a little. And I think a lot of people don't get that uh, relief from the pressures of society as much anymore. Even in the bush now, you can still always communicate, right? And those adventures, they kept me going. They took me to all these cool places and learned all these skills of pack rafting and horse packing and small aircraft stuff and big mountain hiking. And hunting became that thing for me, and it became pretty all encompassing for a while. I won't lie; I would spend a lot of time out there, months at a time, on the land. And and now that I have young kids, my kids were raised on the land, and they're sheep hunters and moose hunters and doing all this stuff. And those are the times that I found we've really connected as a parent. Uh, when you do hard things with your kids, this is a way that you really bond in a deeper, kind of bigger level, right? And, I've seen that. We have a strong connection from being out. My daughter guides with me, and we've done big horse packing trips together. And, I think it bonded our relationship in a different way.
Absolutely. Having kids, I think, is like the number one way to start to change the way you view conservation. Right? And you start thinking about what's next for my family. And now that I have this baby in my hands, I just have a 3-year-old, and it's definitely in the 3 years started to change the way I value it. I mean, not that I didn't value before, but it changes the way in which it's valued, the idea of maintaining these wild places. so that those experiences can continue. And I love that the original inReach was a rock with a piece of flag and tape tied to it.
Yeah, yeah, totally, right? And I see that in my work life and in my social life in the Yukon now, that I value public land being open in a way that I didn't before because I'm thinking about the future of the kids and how regulations change and things like that.
Getting into hunting can feel overwhelming. Gear, safety, regulations, where to start, what to do next. That's exactly why we're thrilled to be partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. Certified Hunter gives new and returning hunters a clear, practical path into the field with online hunter education that is built around real preparation, not just checking a box. Whether you're taking hunter education for the first time or you're helping someone else to get started, visit CertifiedHunter.com and take the next step toward becoming a safer, more confident hunter. Again, that's CertifiedHunter.com. Yeah. And your kids like rock stars, aren't they? Right? Are they in a big rock band?
Yeah, they're in this touring rock band.
That's
So
incredible.
they fly
Yeah.
all around Canada playing shows, and they play to big crowds quite a bit, which is a
I'll
great
link them in the
experience.
show
It's like really
notes,
fun.
right? I'll link them in the show notes. So they can get some more fans, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'd love that. And they're this yeah, so there's this metal kind of rock and roll metal touring band, which in their generation is kind of rare. Like modern kids aren't really into that rock
Yeah.
and roll stuff, but it's a big thing. Hunting sheep with your kid and that big experience is one thing, and seeing your kid perform to 3,000 people live is also a big exciting experience. And I feel privileged that they have the balance and the value of both of those worlds a little bit.
That's so cool. I would love to talk more about that. Not really the point of this podcast, but I just find it really fascinating. Very cool. So I want to jump into kind of talking about the expedition. Obviously, that's why we're here. But before I
Yeah,
do, I
sure.
want to make the connection a little bit for listeners that a trip like this probably uses a lot of the same instincts that hunters rely on as well, like reading country, managing risk, caring for your equipment, understanding weather, knowing when to push, when not to push. So I think there's some lessons that even novice hunters can learn from this huge, Arctic expedition. But to kind of get us started on it, could you give us like the big picture version of this expedition? You know, the where, when, whys, kind of vision before we kind of dive into it.
Yeah, for sure. So the Canadian Rangers are a section of the Canadian military. And the objective of the Rangers is to really know landscapes and how to travel and how to do things. So the Rangers, we're reservists in the military. We bring our own equipment, the military rents it from us, and they send us out on the land to kind of get to know how to get to places. So it's about knowing where to cross the ice on a river safely or what tool you need to get to a specific spot. So, say that there's some kind of event or there's a search and rescue situation or something. We're intended to be kind of guides and mentors to know how to get to these places and the right tools to use to get there. So, this expedition it's a ranger expedition, and we wanted to do a crossing of the Northwest Passage, which is essentially the north coast of Canada before the islands that go into the Arctic archipelago. So this trip is, I'll have to convert it, but it was 5,000 kilometers long, which is, I think, like 3,800 miles on a snow machine. And we are going to 17 different communities we went. And the intent was for us to go to each community. The community local ranger patrol would come out and meet us halfway, guide us to their town, take us partway to the next town, and on repeat. And this was an exercise in getting these groups to work together. If there is any kind of big event, search and rescue, military operation going on, the North is small, right? These communities are small, and you need to have a local connection in those places if you want to be able to really function and work there. There's only one gas station in these towns. You got to know the person with the key to the gas station. There's only
Yeah.
one workshop. You got to know the person with the workshop.
Yeah.
So this is really an exercise in connecting the North and doing a big, hard project together, which was intended to inspire the local patrols, do an exchange of knowledge between each. So um, our core group of 7 people who did the whole trip, consisted of some people from the Yukon, which is really mountainous, big terrain on the Alaska border, big ice fields, deep snow. We had people from the central Arctic, which is like coastal, ocean, kind of close to the tree line. And then we had Eastern Arctic people who live like it's still well below zero there, and they're snowmobiling on the ice right now. So they all these people have different skill sets related to their specific area, and this patrol crossed multiple ecosystems. So we needed all those skill sets, and the intent wasn't just to have each of those skill sets; it was to transfer that information between us and the group, and between the people in those communities. In some of these places, people haven't seen a lot of modern navigation stuff. So we would teach the local patrols about, mapping and navigation. And then they would teach us about, how to cross the big open leads in the sea ice. It was essentially on this trip for more than 50 days. It was below minus 40 Celsius, which is, I think, minus 40 Celsius and Fahrenheit meet at minus 40.
I think so. Yeah.
That's pretty cold
Yeah.
to be surviving, and we're tenting at night and keeping equipment running and those things. It's like a very specific skill set, and having all those advanced knowledge people there was a really valuable part of it. So yeah, this trip was to cross all that area, connect all those Canadians, and learn and work together to kind of bond the North. And everybody's looking at the Arctic right now. It's a big time in the
Yeah.
North, so it was a showcase of what average citizens who are reservists could pull off something really big like this in conjunction and with support from the military.
It's super interesting. So I know it's not really comparable, but a lot of my early career was spent in outdoor education, where I led big trips largely for novice outdoors people, right? So maybe taking a group of 12 students on a month long backpacking trip, and uh, um or going down the Grand Canyon, or spend some time in the Himalayas, things like that. And I always remember, like, when you have big expeditions, right, big trips, you're having to prepare. There always seems a time where I would like sit down like the night before we leave and just be like, oh, one, there's a big task coming up. And two,
Yeah.
have I prepared appropriately to make this happen? Right. And so for something like this, I imagine you had to have had a moment like that. I mean, the preparation alone, I'm sure, was just wild. Could you kind of talk about what that looked like to prepare to embark on this expedition?
Yeah, for sure. It's like a big part of the story, right? I mean, the trip itself was 50 days, but the prep, I went to the Arctic for a month a year for almost 4 years, uh, training for this. So, they're over time, they're kind of selecting the right people for this job. And team selection for an event like this is partially about skills and tangible physical skills, but it's partially about interpersonal skills too, right?
Yeah.
Because you might get, and this happened to us, you might get stuck in a tent for 7 days, and you want to all be able to get along. So this trip, preparation started at that level of going north, learning these skills, doing these things. And then we hired a company called Scotty, who the owners is one of the first people to ski to the North Pole unsupported. And this wonderful woman, Sarah McNair Landry, who lives on Baffin Island and does all these remote climbs and paddling and skiing. Your podcast followers should follow her for sure. She's one of the most exceptional people in North America. So they hired some very high end, high caliber people to teach us about camping at those kind of temperatures, keeping warm, doing those things. We did quite a bit of gear testing. And one of the goals of the Rangers is to, provide information to the military about the best tools and way to move. So over this time, we started refining our equipment, picking the right snow machines, the right skimmers, which are toboggans you pull behind, the right way to strap the stuff in there, the right tent system, which is this kind of standard Arctic system called a Hilleberg tent, how to heat those tents. So there's all these layers and layers and layers of things. And then for the month before, if you wanted to find Jim Welsh, you'd find him in his shop, refining gear, sharpening tools, uh, and trying to assess what to take and what not to take. On a trip of this magnitude, nobody's really done a trip like that. So it's hard to determine kind of what you need and what you don't need. There's a little bit of out in the ether there. So those things, it all builds up in that last week, also being with my kids, knowing I'm going to be gone for 2.5 months kind of thing. There's a big anticipation and energy before these trips that you have to manage a little bit and keep it under control, and also try to not just keep putting stuff in your skimmer. Like I might need this just in case, like a pack rat, which I did. I had a little bit too much stuff on the trip. Is one of the things I would say. I would go with less next time. Um, so you build up to this big energy before this thing. And when you finally step off, it's this big moment of relief, because I have a job where I had to work in advance. I had to spend extra time with my kids. There's all this pressure. When you finally get out there, it's like a big, exciting moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking the same thing. Like when you have all the preparation, you finally just start. It's like, well, I've got what I've got now, right? From here, we're just going to figure it out. you know,
Yeah, my skimmer was this big ball of stuff, and fortunately, in some communities, I could get rid of the things we didn't need. And like we started in the tree line, so I had a little tiny wood stove my son had welded up with me, and then at the halfway point of the trip, you don't see another tree for the rest of the trip. So there's things we were fortunately able to get rid of on the way to help us do that.
so and this may not exist like a day to day, but like what how did it operate from like a day to day perspective? Um, or uh, did you have norms? I guess what I'm trying to say, or is it all just kind of up to the weather, up to the conditions, etc.? But could you kind of explain what the day to day looked like if that was the case?
Yeah, this was run in a military format, and we had some kind of like very military thinking people with us, which was great. So we had a way that we traveled in a specific line. When we park, we all pull in beside each other so that we could communicate what's going on. Our days would typically start pretty early because the wind would pick up in the afternoon a lot of the time. And our days were big. They're like 12 to 16 hours a lot of the time, covering, on average, we do 200 kilometers a day, which is, over 100 miles a day on a snow machine with no trails, like pretty tough, big, hard days. So we'd start pretty early. We would ride all day. Our format was we'd ride for 45 minutes, stop for 10 or 15. And that was a pretty rigid format that we would do. And that method, though, you kind of can anticipate when you need to stop for a pee break or have some food or whatever. And you knew you were expected to make that 45-minute run without stopping. So you had to make sure your gear was strapped down and that you wouldn't interrupt that travel. So that consistency was really important. It kept us moving really quickly. And I would say we probably set some, it's not official or anything, but we probably set some speed records across that kind of place. Not that wasn't our intent, but that format worked so well that we were very efficient and traveled really quite effectively across the landscape. So we travel all day. And then at the end of the day, there's a bit of a camp set up where we'd put our snow machines on the exterior with our tents in the middle so that there's a bit of a barrier for polar bears. There, we might hear them having to cross our stuff to get over to our tents, which
Hmm.
is a real concern. There's a
Yeah.
ton of bears in that country. And a little bit of social time in the tent, but really your day consisted of getting a little bit of heat in your tent, drying all your equipment, boiling water, which would take, an hour and a bit. We had a lot of freeze dried meals, cooking that food. And by the time that was done, you're pretty much in your sleeping bag in a coma kind of thing. It was less social than I expected it to be. Because in those temperatures, you have so many clothes on and your face is covered and your goggles. You kind of see the whole trip through a little tiny hole in front of your eyes. It's a weird way to experience something like that. Uh, but it's hard to talk. It's hard to like hang out when you're dressed up like that. So our days were kind of consistent like that. And then in every community, we would try and spend, 2 to 4 days in each place because the intent was to get to know the people and get to know the communities and understand the culture a little bit in each of these places. So, um, yeah, that's kind of how we went across. And we ended up at some point, like, almost 2 weeks ahead of schedule
Really?
because we were moving so effectively. So, in that space where we had time, we kind of would spend a little extra time in communities and work on our equipment and go to the local ranger meetings and things like that.
That's really cool. So I can't imagine that something like this could occur without some significant logistical support. Can you kind of describe what that looked like on sort of the back end? I'm sure that had to be a team or teams supporting you all as you traveled across Northwest Passage.
Yeah, and this was the military trying to showcase what they can do in the north.
Hmm.
So our logistics were really strong. We had a big group, we had multiple aircraft, probably, in excess of 150 people in the background through this whole thing, kind of prepping equipment. We had a plane going ahead of us with food and things. Did we need all that stuff? Like we could have done it with less, but that wasn't the intent. The intent is for Canada to figure out how to move people and food and resources to these places. Because you end up in a small town like Kugaruk, there's one grocery store, and you can't roll in with a big group of people and consume all the food for the community or consume all the fuel for the
Yeah,
community. So there's all these things that you wouldn't think of down south where these places have very limited resources. So we would have to move a lot of stuff with us and ahead of us. So we had mechanics to maintain our machines and kind of things like that to keep us going as we went. So it was a big logistical thing in the background to kind of keep us all going.
that's awesome. So, as it relates, I mean, obviously, you're moving across very remote environments, and even then, sea ice, which is a constant changing condition, and things like that. I imagine there is a significant amount of judgment and decision making being done, like on a day to day, as it relates to group safety, personal safety, etc. How is that managed within the group?
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I was so impressed with and was done so well. We had kind of a linear structure working together um, to keep the safety part going. And we actually had a group that would go ahead of us on an airplane to check the sea ice. The sea ice is this weird, fickle creature, right? It's affected by the tide, so it's always fluxing up and down. The wind can make it move around. So there's all these parts happening that it's like in a state of constant change. So any technical area where we're concerned about, we'd have a twin otter with a group fly above. We had some satellite imagery people were checking every day. And then in our dash, we had cell phones mounted in the dash and a heated system with a charger where we could kind of get real time updates. So if the plane saw open water, they could send us stuff to the Gaia mapping system, which is an open source public map system, so that we could kind of navigate and do it gracefully and safely. This is big remote places, right? If somebody gets hurt for real out there, um, it's hard to come get them. And if it's a storm, it could take days to come get them. So safety was like top of mind. And it's weird when you travel in the Arctic, you have to take your kind of safety threshold that you would accept down south and you have to squish it way down. You really can't take any risks in that place in those conditions. So your decision making kind of matrix shifts a little bit and you have to be way more conservative. And we were really fortunate to have the kind of support that allowed us. We had no major injuries. We had one frostbite injury. But aside from that, we are kind of safe and good to go out there.
So you had folks. Let me make sure I get this right. So you had airplanes traveling ahead of you for the entire trip, or just parts of it to kind of relay that information back?
Yeah, so we had a team that would go ahead of us, go to the community, meet the community, find us a community hall or somewhere to sleep. We just tented on cots in a lot of gymnasiums on this trip or things like that.
Yeah.
And that group with those air assets yeah, they would go ahead for the technical sections and kind of check it for us in advance. And this is part of this like building the information about the Arctic for the Canadian forces so that we kind of are getting a sense of that. And the sea ice, with climate change and things,
Mhm.
people feel like it's maybe changing or from year to year it's been different. So this is part of this like mapping how to travel in that.
Mm. Did you have a moment, I mean, having done, trips and expeditions in the past, I feel like I always had a moment was like, "Man, this is why I'm here." Right? This is the moment. Did you have one of those kind of moments like, "This is why I'm doing this?"
There's this great moment I can totally like that. When I think about the trip, it's the most prominent one. You talked about being a kid and think about the Arctic and explorers. And I was probably, 13, 14 years old. I was in a doctor's office and there was the National Geographic where the cover, or at least inside, is a picture of the Sir John Franklin party's graves that they found on Beechy Island. And there's this great kind of National Geographic story about that. And I read that. And from that point forward, I've definitely had this Arctic focus in my life. And the center of our 5,000 kilometers happened around between Cambridge Bay and Joe Haven. And that section of ice is where the Franklin expedition went missing. And they spent 3 years locked in the ice. 129 people all died in that place. And that section it's kind of the crux move. It's very remote. There's some islands there that make the ocean current a lot stronger. And so the ice moves more there. We're getting close to the full moon at that time, so there's more flux in the ice. And the section from Cambridge to Joe hasn't been frozen in the locals said about 40 years. So no one had done it. And this winter, as a kind of feather in our cap, was the coldest winter anybody could remember up there. It was the coldest, stormiest winter. And coincidentally, that section that hadn't frozen forever froze for the first time in 40 years. So we had to, do some serious decision making. We used some satellite imagery and some planes. We saw that it was frozen. It looked like it was traversable. So we did some group decision making about it. We did some training for we had dry suits and throw ropes, and we in parking lots we went out and trained. And it's 40 below. We had to make sure we could get in the dry suits and do things like that. And then we left on this thing, which is about a 3-day traverse. And in the middle of that, crossing that sea ice that nobody had crossed in 40 years, going past the wreck of Franklin's boat, the Terror, things like that. Like that was a big, profound moment, kind of the crux move. As remote a place as you can get, not only in North America, but on the planet, you're getting into things like that. So, when you're there, you'll probably never be there again in your life. It was a cold but beautiful day, and it's just we're navigating through a bunch of jumble ice, and there's just a big moment there that really struck me as like, man, this is one of those peak profound moments in your life that maybe you set your compass towards when you're a young person. And at that time, was the team was great, everybody's happy, and we're just having a big experience together. So it's a little bit of magic for sure.
Absolutely. I know, like, you were kinda going from, um, town to town. They called towns? I'm not sure what
Yeah,
the
sure.
correct
Yeah,
nomenclature is
communities. A
there,
lot of
but
people would call them
communities, yeah,
communities.
community to community. How important was sort of the local knowledge for the folks who are, live there day in, day out into helping lead to the success of this expedition?
Yeah, they just have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
Right? You're a lot of us were out of our element the whole time. So you're relying on your base skill level and your kind of common sense and uh, personal risk taking threshold. But these people live out there, and it's such a different world. Like none of it has its own language. Most people speak Inuktitut. Um, they make all of their own clothes because there's not really modern clothing suitable for that environment. So everybody's wearing full fur clothes, and I'll send you a photo of a guy we met who was wearing a full wolf suit, head to
I
toe,
saw that on your
parka
on
and
your
pants.
Facebook. Yeah.
You run into the guy wearing a full wolf suit, that guy is legit.
Yeah. That's
You're gonna
instant
trust
street
him.
cred right there.
Yeah, quite a bit of street cred in that situation. Um, so those people, they know how to move. They know the pace to move at. They know what to avoid. And a lot of times there's some shortcuts where you could go overland and find some things, but they also know where there's shelters. Up there's little cabins built on the landscape all over. So that if you're in a big blizzard or things start to go really sideways, you can find some shelter. Because it is kind of scary in that environment where it's flat, there's no hills, there's nothing to hide behind. We had winds in excess of 111 kilometers an hour at one point. And when it's minus 40 and the wind is 100 kilometers an hour, um, shelter matters.
Yeah.
This is all
Risk.
part of like how to stay safe. So that knowledge is really important. You can just learn so much from those people because they live a different lifestyle than us. And this like relating to your podcast and hunting, food. I saw a $9 can of Pepsi in Cougaruk. So food is very, very expensive. Work isn't plentiful. So people there, they hunt all the time because that's how they feed their family. They fish all the time. They go fishing every week. They're out hunting at all times. Almost every week, people are out hunting, and the people who are successful come back. They calmly share it with the community. Maybe people who don't have enough food that week, and there's this kind of deep, strong relationship with the land and hunting that's totally different than ours. I hunt for food for my family. We eat almost exclusively wild game. But hunting in North America still has a recreational kind of component.
Mhm.
And in the Arctic, this is like a survival food component. So the value and the importance and the relationship with that is very different than what we experience as Southern hunters.
Yeah. What one thing I'm curious about it having, gone through from tip to tail this entire expedition and seeing, meeting the people, seeing the landscape. As I was kind of doing my research deep dive, because now that you've all have uh, finished, there's been a lot of media coverage on this. Like, New York Times has done coverage on this expedition, and um, um, you mentioned you guys were on the cover. It was the Globe and Mail? I don't think we
The
have that.
Globe and Mail is like the
Yeah,
Canadian equivalent. It's one of our biggest
yeah,
yes.
which is awesome. But a lot of it related back to the idea of, this expedition sort of strengthening, um, like, Arctic sovereignty for Canada. So you having gone through this whole expedition, um, from your perspective, how did that change the idea of Arctic sovereignty and the importance of it, and et cetera, after having gone through this whole expedition?
Well, there's so many big thoughts around this. Like Canadians are really thinking about the Arctic now. They're focused on it. There's been a lot of controversy over the Arctic with the Canada-U.S. relationship and things like that.
Mhm.
So Canadians are captivated by it at this time. And at the start of this trip, we didn't have a lot of people following us or kind of support in general. But as we went, I think that people started to see something uh, you know, average kind of Canadians going out and doing this big thing and telling a hard story. Like we're doing hard things. We're stuck in big blizzards. We're
Mhm.
overcoming really significant challenges almost all the time in the coldest winter on record, you know?
Yeah.
So um, it over time, it kind of captured Canadians. And I think that people want to see this kind of core competency. They're excited to see people doing hard things. And as we went, this kind of we picked up some different reporters from different places who started telling our story. And as we went, we started getting notes from all over the country and then eventually all over the world. And it built this kind of momentum. And even my personal page was getting 100,000 views a day, kind of stuff, which I had no awareness of at the time. I was in a sleeping bag at minus 50, putting some notes out that I thought my family and my closest friends were reading. But in the end, it became this kind of big thing. And I think in a time where life is very comfortable in North America for a lot of people, uh, it was refreshing for them to see us out there, like kind of working against the elements and working hard and having big travel days and doing something different and unique and showcasing like in the sovereignty part, people envision the Arctic as this vast, barren wasteland, which it is vast and it is barren. But when we pulled into communities, we saw these vibrant communities of people who are living on the land, living a totally different lifestyle, kind of supporting each other. And we saw great things. Like one of the things that would happen in every community, there'd kind of be a parade where people would stand on the street and we'd snowmobile by with a flag on the back of our snow machine and calmly, they would take us afterwards to the community hall where the whole community would come and host a square dance. And these events were like the whole people there, they're like really positive. They're almost always like a sober family community event where everybody goes and they dance together. And, it's like this northern culture with like, a couple of a fiddle and an accordion and a drummer, guitar player, bass player who would play these long loops of 2 bars of a song for like 6 hours. And the whole community would come dance. And it was just like this positive, nice way uh, to be welcomed in these communities. And we saw this thing that changed my perspective on the North and, you know, how vibrant this place is and what's going on.
That's really cool. Yeah, the media attention and the people following along on what you all were doing, um, I couldn't help but think like how and you kind of referenced this, but like how rare it is for that like attention being placed on a big expedition, right? Like back in the day, like when Franklin and Perry and Shackleton were out doing like that was like newspaper qual. I was like every day, they're out, doing these big, and so like, I feel like this was really unique, you know, to
Yeah,
have, I to look on the front of a newspaper and see Arctic exploration be on, on the cover is like, man, it's like a blast from the, back in the day, and so I just think that's a really neat connection to have. It must be so cool to have been a part of it. Like that must be a really cool moment.
yeah. It feels great, and to come home and everywhere I go, people are asking questions, and I'm getting notes all the time about things, and Gaelic Outdoors people love gear and equipment,
Yeah.
and we were really well refined, and our equipment worked very well, and we were quite comfortable at those temperatures, which was surprising to me. So it's been fun to share those lessons learned with people to help, and I think it's inspired a lot of people to kind of go out there and get on it a little bit and go do some things. And I think seeing people do hard things makes you realize, yeah, like you can just get your act together and go do it. Go try it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So after completing a trip like this, um, what what feels different to you when you go back home to normal life?
That's such a great question. I mean, the thing that happened to me out there uh, was kind of being out of reception and not having tons of interruptions every day. And you have this one goal to accomplish every day. And although it's hard, you have to be really present in the moment to accomplish it. And it just was really contrasted to me how little presence a lot of us have all the time right now because we're just constantly getting text and notes. And even during an interview, I had to put my phone on focus because I probably got like nine things popped up, right?
Yeah.
So I just came home with this kind of, I'd been active every day. So my physical health was great. But I was really astounded by the lack of noise in my life, how my mental health was at the end. Like I just felt really good and really focused and really, I'd accomplished something big and fun. The team selection was fantastic. We had no conflict. We just left having the best time laughing and having fun together and having real human connection and meeting tons of interesting, unique people everywhere. Um, it's just a real privilege, you know. And I've tried to protect that as I come back to my normal work life, but it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So from this expedition, what do you want your kids or even like younger rangers to learn from this story?
I think that like building a team, preparing, and getting together. Uh, these are the marking moments in your life, and don't let them slip by. It's easy to get caught up in the world, but make sure that you go have a couple big things that you do that you can reflect back on, and those big moments, like we talked about crossing that one big section. Like there's a kind of joy and presence that you get there that people meditate or do yoga for or whatever, and you can find it out in the woods. And I think for the people in your podcast that are like new to hunting and outdoors, I mean, this is the objective, right? To get to this place where you have a sense of pride and accomplishment and a kind of presence and a kind of peace that you get outside. And it's a lot of work to get there. As somebody with a parent taking their kids out, it's so easy to go, oh, it's too hard or it's cold out today. The kids are going to whine. But when you push through that barrier, it's almost always worth it. And this was a big barrier. This was a big trip, a big barrier. But even on a smaller scale, I think about that now. I've come home and I'm booking the next hunting trips this fall with my kids because that place is worth getting to, even if it's hard. And the more you do it, the easier it gets to get there. And if you're a new hunter, a new outdoors person, part of the fun is overcoming those challenges and learning how to overcome those things so that you can get to that place easier and faster and more often. And you're going to find a connection with your family and your friends and yourself that have greater value than most other things I've tried in my life.
Man, I love that answer. um, you know, and that was actually like my next question to you. Like, if we were to draw, like, even though this is this huge expedition, but if we were to draw any lessons that might be able to pertain and be meaningful for novice hunters, what that might be, because that's the audience listening to the show. But I think you answered the question in there, right? In that, um, there are moments of difficulty in everything, whether it be giant expeditions or something that you're starting out new. But I would be hard pressed to identify anything that's truly meaningful that I've done or have accomplished or learned that didn't have some level of challenge in it. you know, because you're having to overcome that challenge, and the um, and particularly, like within like we talk about on the show a lot, the R3 idea of R3 of recruiting and retaining, reactivating hunters, and the need for new hunters in North America, and all these things. And then I travel quite a bit in the hunter ed world, and there's all these talks about removing barriers for hunting and things like that. And so it's hard not to sit on both sides of the fence, right? And that, yeah, you want to
Yeah.
make it accessible for people, but at the same time, there's always challenge in learning something new. And the challenge isn't necessarily crossing the Arctic Ocean, but there's the challenges and learning and being uncomfortable outdoors, and like that's always going to happen. But at the end of the day, that's what makes things meaningful, is overcoming something that's challenging to you.
Yeah, we had a big one of the biggest moments on the trip. We got stuck in a really severe blizzard, and we were on the Alaska border, and this blizzard went on for like 10 days, and the winds were 100 kilometers an hour, and it was below minus 30, minus 40 the whole time. And we went to meet our the others. The old pro patrol was coming with us, and we had some journalists with us, and all these people, and we're navigating down a river, and the wind picked up so strong that it was turning the snow machines in 360s
Oh my
on the
God.
ice. So you could barely drive, you could barely see 5 feet in front of you. You couldn't talk because the wind was so loud, and things were getting really serious. We are trying to stay ahead of the storm, and we lost the race essentially. And at one point, two people went through the ice. It was only a foot deep, but at those temperatures and that wind, everything froze immediately, and we had to make an emergency bivouac camp. And we tried to go inland to find some shelter. We saw the topographic map that there was a hill that we could maybe hide behind. And we started moving towards it. And I was maybe the second in line. And the snow was so blowing and severe that I lost the person in front of me. And I only knew where they were because 10 minutes into me looking, a windshield blew past me. The wind had blown the windshield right off this guy's snow machine.
I
And
can't.
it allowed me to identify. And we went to make an emergency camp, and not everybody had tents adequate for that situation. But this team who had prepared and had trained, I saw this cool team thing happen where uh, we could walk up to the tent being set out, and everybody had a job, and they knew their job, and we didn't have to talk, we didn't have to communicate, and we were so well prepared that we were really calm. And there's this place of like preparedness and organization and confidence and competence in each other, where we could walk up, and I saw we didn't have to communicate. You just look at the next person, and the things happen. And we set this tent up, or these tents up, and everybody got inside. And it was this profound kind of moment of what a real team looks like.
Yeah.
And overcoming that hardship, there was a kind of pride after in the morning where it was a scary, hard night. But we woke up in the morning, and everybody had a new lease on life a little bit, and there's these big smiles as we dug our snow machines out of the snowdrifts. And, that was super hard and challenging. But when I look back, it's like one of the biggest moments. And you've done a lot of big, hard trips too, right? Where you get this kind of fun that in the moment, it's not that fun. But afterwards, you're like, oh, that was one of the big core points of that trip. Like that was the value of that trip in some way, shape, or form.
The type 2 fun a little bit. you know?
Yeah, we're dipping into type 3 a little bit there.
Yeah, yeah, it could yeah, it happens for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And you're welcome to, disagree with me here. I would imagine, though, the fact that that happened early in the trip probably set up the rest of your expedition, right? To have, more camaraderie, more team feeling, et cetera, because you kinda got that one, you built the trust in your teammates, and two, you kind of had that experience together. You have a shared experience, of getting through it.
Yeah, for sure, and it actually impacted, I think, our speed because anytime there was a storm coming, we didn't want that to happen again, right? So, I
Lessons
think it put
learned.
us ahead of schedule,
Yeah.
because we didn't wanna end up there. But those things and I talk about this with hunting a lot with my daughter, we've done these big, hard mountain horse trips together, and those really hard times that we've had are the ones that we reflect on, and we have this, I think, very unique father-daughter relationship. I like she's always telling me what's going on and very honest and open with me, and I think it's from doing those things together, you know? Sleeping under a tree in the rain on the Alaska border with the big ice fields there. It's
Mhm.
cold, it's hard. Every morning is hard out there, and, I just think it really bonds you in a different way. And for the people that are here learning about hunting or thinking about going hunting, uh, I haven't found any other way to get that thing, to get that relationship together. You know, there's great things like soccer and things are wonderful, but you don't get that experience out of it to overcome something together.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. I could safely say some of the closest friendships I have in my life are people that I've gone through really challenging moments in the outdoors with. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. And have you been sheep hunting? You've had the privilege to go sheep hunting?
No, no, I'm an East Coast guy, I was born and raised in South Carolina. I've traveled a good bit, but never had opportunity to go sheep hunting,
That's
but
what I say sheep hunting is just that kind of hardship together that we
yeah.
have my family that says that sheep taste the best because they're basted in tears because it's just so challenging, and when you are successful, it just feels so much bigger
Yeah,
because you have to
absolutely.
work so hard for it.
Yeah, things you earn, right, have a different feel for them for sure. Yeah, that's really cool. So, um, I it was difficult to generate a list of questions for this podcast because this is such a broad spectrum. I wanted to talk about the actual nuts and bolts, but I also want to talk about the more like the growth and, interpersonal side. Is there anything that you think would be really cool to chat about that I haven't brought up in this as a part of the conversation, or even just stories that I mean that's my favorite part of listening to tales of the expedition is you always have stories. Anything I didn't ask about or stuff you want to share?
One of the things that really captured me on this trip, I thought this was gonna be this big snowmobile adventure thing, and it certainly was that, but the part that caught me was the cultural piece. And in the Western Arctic, there's a clothing style. The beauty of the North is everybody makes their own clothing. And it was really profound to me to run into some people. I ran into a guy who in 1996, I think, had harvested a polar bear when he was 18. It's like a rite of passage in their community. And he had made pants. So nobody's displaying on their wall. He turned it into pants and mitts. And that was 1996 or 1998. And he's still wearing those pants. So when people make things there, they make these parkas and they're very elaborate. And I can't imagine how much time they take to make. But they put a ton of heart and soul and effort into it. And the gear is meant to last them their lifetime. And it's very high quality. And there's things that change as you go across. So in the Western Arctic, the ruffs on their parkas hang straight down and they wear big gauntlet mitts up to here. And as it gets colder and more remote and windier, the shape changes. So the ruff on the parka goes around their face in a really tight circle to keep the wind out. The mitts come really short with a big fur ruff that bumps up against their parka. And each family has a design made out of the patterns from seal or something. When you go to a community, you can tell who's from each family by the clothing they wear, and you almost see no name brand stuff out there. So it's like such a neat thing in a time when we buy clothes, we might down coat out sheep hunting, I tear it to pieces every 2 or 3 years, and I get a new one.
Yeah.
And see these people who, they invest in this stuff in a different way. It's thought out. There's tons of tradition behind it, and it's this brilliant crossover of function and fashion. Where they're showing their family story a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's also super super practical. And if you get out in a giant storm and you're stuck in a snowdrift, in the central Arctic, like Nauiet, places like that, everybody puts a giant point on the hood of their parka. And they started doing this apparently because some guys got stuck out. When you get really cold in the barren landscape, everybody curls up in a ball and the snow blows a drift over you. And so they started putting this point on so that if you get snow drifted in and you're freezing, the point will be sticking out of the snowdrift so they can find you. And apparently it's worked.
That
So,
is
so,
wild.
so it's wild, right? Like think about how serious that is.
Yeah.
Uh, so it was just this neat thing that I took a lot from it, and I like changed my gear, and now I'm getting some furs to make some of my own stuff for the next expedition we have coming up. So I really thought that was cool. And then, there's one place we were in, maybe Nauiat, and we went and met the local ranger patrol, and their whole meeting was held in a Inuktitut, and it was very organized and very well put together, and it was quite impressive for a small community of that size. And on the back wall was two pieces of whale baleen, which are the teeth of a bowhead whale,
Mm.
and they're long. They're like 20 feet long, and they were crossed on the back wall, and in between there was a steel bar with a harpoon tip, but it didn't have a barb. It was just a sharpened piece of steel, and the other end was a radiator hose made as a handle. And at the end of the meeting, I talked to one of the people there. I was like, "Oh, tell me about this display." And he goes, "Oh, well, that's the last bowhead whale we harvested, and I had to get off the boat and harpoon the whale with that spear." And this is the Arctic Ocean. People commonly don't have life jackets. Very few people know how to swim because the water is so cold.
Yeah.
And the tenacity and the skill set and the capability of these people that really struck me, that in that room, I spent probably 2 hours talking to people, and everybody had this big, profound outdoor story, commonly related to hunting. Two guys I met, the one guy had resuscitated the other guy 3 different times. You
Gosh.
talk about doing hard things with your friends, right?
Yeah.
And I thought about that room. There's 30 people in that room. They all told me stories like that. And if I went to, southern Canada somewhere and met 30 people, they would tell me about the latte they got that morning or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's this kind of like hardship up there that breeds this kind of confidence and competence that was like it was really striking and profound to see it over and over again in these places. The Arctic is a different world in some ways.
Absolutely. I, I I'm just thinking about the guys that I know here in South Carolina who have deer blinds that have air conditioning and microwaves in them.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
exactly.
That
You know,
that
and that
that's not quite the same playing field.
it's not the same playing field. Yeah, of course. And it was interesting also as we went across, many of the communities had recently had or were involved in a search and rescue situation, right? The hockey teams there to go play hockey in the next community, they would snowmobile like 300 kilometers,
My goodness.
and it's like freezing cold. So there's this kind of hardship, but it breeds this real genuine kind of community thing. And you'll notice in the North, people are always laughing and they always joke with each other a lot, like way more than anywhere else I've ever been. And I think it's a response to a pretty hard, challenging life, and they overcome it by being a community and having these square dances and trying to have fun whenever they can.
Yeah. That's super fascinating, and I I feel like that's something that you see all over the place, right? I've had the opportunity to be in some really rural areas of Southeast Asia, and meet communities that have they have hardships in their lives, but they're the absolute nicest, most generous, kind people you ever meet. And I think that having hardships like that can put things into perspective sometimes. But yeah, that's super interesting. What was it like crossing the finish line? What were the thoughts, the feelings, the all of that above?
Well, it was so neat. We ended in Churchill, Manitoba, which is a very unique community. There's a giant Hudson's Bay fort there, built in 1860. So it's like steeped in Canadian history. The British and the French had battles with giant ships, the ships with all the masts and stuff in front of that town. Like things like that happened there. And as we pulled into town, the whole community came out, and the Canadian military was so gracious in flying some of our family members up to come support us and welcome us in. And after being away, it was such a privilege to kind of come into this big parade situation, and people had made some signs for us and stuff. And it was it was two tiered. It was so cool and so fun, and we'd accomplished this big thing. But to also know that it was the end of one, probably that's probably the biggest outdoor adventure I'll go on in my life. And I've made my life doing outdoor adventures. So to see the end of it was also, there was like this pretty somber moment. And when you're with a team that has bonded so well and you're having so much fun together and we're always laughing, and, to know that that was our last time hanging out together like that. And they're from all over the Arctic, right? It's not easy for us to get together
Yeah.
and have a barbecue and reminisce.
Yeah.
So there was this feeling of like, oh man, that was so great, but it was so hard for it to be done at the same time.
I bet. Do you have more big trips on your horizon?
Yeah, it's a big time for the Canadian Rangers. So, as a sergeant, I'm involved in some big planning stuff right now. So it looks like we're going to try and do another big Arctic expedition. Hopefully, I have the privilege of being on it, and we're doing some big mountaineering stuff in the next little bit, and it's pretty neat to see Canada supporting this organization the way that they are right now, because it does bring a lot of value to the North. I mean, the Rangers, it's this cool way that Canada has put money and resources and training in the North. So by renting our equipment, it ensures that people have good equipment they can rent to the military for use. And also, they send people in to teach us outdoor skills, so mapping and navigation and search and rescue and all those things. So Canada's done this really nice, graceful job in sending skills and resources to these remote communities to kind of help make it a better place. And as part of like sovereignty and making the North thrive, it's a pretty neat exercise, social exercise, we can call it. And right now, after this big trip and with all the folks on the Arctic, we're getting a lot of opportunity to be out on the land, which is really nice. It's like the Rangers consist of a bunch of my best friends that I love traveling with, and we go do great things together. So I hope to do as much of it as possible.
For sure. For sure. Well, Jim, thanks so much for taking the time to re-record this episode with me. I love this story. Hopefully, our paths cross soon. We can talk more about it. This is it's really cool.
Yeah, I'd love to see you in person, and I'd love to come talk about this trip at any big hunting event you have coming up. So don't be afraid to reach out anytime. And I love what you're doing. Like getting my passion is getting people out there and connecting with the land, and this is one of the steps to help do that. So nice job and helping encourage people to get out there.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. And that's the end of my conversation with Jim. But I wanted to add a few more pieces just for context. If you're watching online, you'll notice that this is filmed at a different time. I didn't do a wardrobe change mid episode, but I wanted to include a really interesting piece from the original recording of this episode. As I mentioned, Jim and I had to re record this conversation because of some technical issues with that first recording. Most of that original episode could not be used, which I felt horrible about because Jim introduced us to other rangers on the expedition, and I know that they put a lot of effort into making the episode happen live on site. But there was one piece we were able to save, and I'm so glad that we did. During the first recording, Jim actually took us outside just off the coast of the Arctic Ocean to give us a look around to show where he was. For those watching on YouTube, this is a really cool moment because you get to see a little bit of the landscape and the environment that he's talking about. For those listening on audio only, I know that this part is a bit more visual, but I still think it's worth including. You'll hear Jim describe what we're looking at, and it gives some real context to the conditions, the isolation, and the kind of place where this story is told. So, for the next few minutes, we're going to step out of the standard interview and drop in that clip from our original conversation. So, here's Jim outside in the Arctic.
Yeah, so we're in a Canadian military base in Rankin Inlet. Okay, here we go. We're cranking inlet, none of it at this time. And you can kind of see the Arctic Ocean from where I'm standing. But it's blowing a little bit of the shelter right now. It's blowing about 30 miles an hour. And although it's blue skies, there's snow blowing 10 or 12 feet off the ground. Um, so it's pretty, these are, I would say, typical travel conditions here, kind of what we're working with as we go. So we use
Yeah.
a lot of GPS navigation. We're certainly clear that we don't have any exposed skin at any time. And I wish you could see the Arctic Ocean out here, but it's beautiful, rocky, kind of barren landscape. We're in a bay where the tide is flexing the ice all the time. So be very
Yeah.
careful navigating in this environment because the ice is always shifting and moving and blowing with the wind. So not far from us, there's some open water with walruses. This is kind of the polar bear mecca of Canada. So there's lots of bears around the area, which we're talking about and trying to be safe around. But it's an amazing experience to be part of this environment. Try and operate here. It's nothing works in this cold. It's really challenging.
I could imagine. Wow. Not many podcasts have live from the Arctic Ocean, so
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can't go too long because I'll die. Actually. So,
yeah.
uh, yeah.
All right. You're gonna move back in?
Yeah. I'll move in and we can just do a quick couple pieces of gear if you're interested.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I'm very interested. I'm sure it's awesome to have spots like this to stop at along the way when you can.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's life changing. We can do a
yeah,
quick. These are the machines we're using.
yeah,
So we're using a Skidoo 900 Expedition 4-stroke fuel bolt starting. Using these plastic skimmers to tow our loads. They'll carry about 1,000 pounds
wow,
pretty effortlessly. And yeah, it's been a great model with lots of modifications. You can see we have windshields
yeah,
added on. We're carrying harpoons to test the ice. The
oh,
local
wow.
Inuk guides will walk with a harpoon and they drop it while they walk. And the sound of the metal resonate can tell you how thick the ice is. There's this neat thing. You use a walking stick where you kind of drop it every couple of feet
Hmm.
to feel the resonance.
And that's it for this episode of the Evolving Hunter podcast. A huge, giant thank you to Jim for being on the show. I hope you enjoyed this episode because I know that I certainly enjoyed making it. If you liked what you heard, please share this episode with a friend, family, perhaps even a simple acquaintance, anyone that may get excited to hear about this awesome Arctic expedition. And if you have a question you'd like us to tackle on the show, send it our way. There's a good chance that someone else is wondering the same thing. Send your questions to community@evolvinghunter.com. That's COMMUNITY @evolvinghunter.com. Check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Evolving Hunter Podcast, all one word. Thanks again for listening to the Evolving Hunter Podcast. Please keep learning, keep asking questions, and we'll see you next time. I really hope you enjoyed that episode of the Evolving Hunter Podcast. One last thing before you go. If you're thinking about getting into hunting, before you go and buy gear or plan a hunt, you need the right foundation. That's why we're so excited to be partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. They have state-approved online hunter education that teaches real-world safety, ethics, and responsibility, not just test answers. If you want to start hunting the right way, head to CertifiedHunter.com /evolvinghunter and get certified today.